Hello, my friends. Katie Day with the Moving to Texas team here with another episode of the Real Advice podcast. I am excited for this week's guest, power broker out of New York City with over 10 years in real estate. She is awesome. I'm excited because not only is she an awesome broker and team leader and just doing all the things, she's a badass mom. She travels a ton. I don't really know how she gets it all done. So we're going to dig into all of that today. Please join me in welcoming Kirsten Jordan. What's going on? How are you?
I'm good. I mean, listen, New York is still on fire. And so we are crushing here. It takes a little bit more to get these deals done today, but
it's always taken more to get deals done in New York than anywhere else.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true. That I feel like that we have a different way that things work. I was even talking about this with my Tom Ferry coach today about like, we just onboarded a new sales manager and talking about like how much more flexible we have to be with her objectives and milestones when it comes to closing dates, because so many things push out closings in New York City, and then you deal with attorneys getting contracts signed. So that's just, I mean, it's its own animal.
Yeah. The KPIs, you're like, well, normally we would want to see this many closings in this many days, but like, we'll just talk about
we're going to have
contracts.
We're going to tack 60 days onto that.
I'm sure you'll see impact in other ways, right? And like, you'll know that there's pending deals and things like that. So I'm sure that was a very fun coaching call. Anyways, for those that may not know you, who are you and how did you get into real estate?
Well, my name is Kirsten Jordan. KJ is what they call me on $1 Million List in New York. I was the first female cast member on the show, $1 Million List in New York. But most importantly, I have been in the business, for over 10 years. I think we're almost on 15 this year, which is exciting. And so I got into the business after moving back from living in Italy. I'd been living in Italy for 2 years post college. So I moved to Chicago, then I moved to Italy for a couple of years. I did like my gap year post college,
but stayed.
Luckily, I came home. I made it home.
Yeah.
And so I came back. I moved back to New York, and I thought that because I'd learned Italian, I was going to somehow get into real estate and work with a bunch of Italians, because that was like that all these Italians were going to want to buy real estate in New York City, which there's a lot of Italians love New York, and they do like buying in New York City. So I started off on a team, and then that really quickly didn't work. And then I moved into an assistant position here in New York, which there are a fair number of teams in New York, especially 15 years ago in 2007, 2008, where it was like a one-man show with like a one-person team. Like you had like an assistant and they did a little bit of everything. Our transaction size here is big. Yeah. So you can get away with doing, 20 or 30 transactions a year, and both of you are making really, really good money. And that's something you can actually sustain with one assistant. Essentially, they run around like a chicken with their heads cut off, and then like they do board packages on the weekends and then at night, and like that's the whole thing. So I did that, and then from that I ended up kind of moving out of that role after 5 years into kind of being a team member with like a very unstructured role while I had my first couple of kids, and then I moved to another team at Compass. Actually, I moved to Compass in 2017 and then had my third child at Compass. I feel like everything that happened in real estate is like the chronology of like before and after children.
Yeah.
And then, what was really amazing was I was at Compass and was cast on $1 Million List in New York.
Yeah.
And that changed my career because I was on this hot, incredible team with this, like that had this incredible trajectory, and then essentially like had this opportunity happen, and it made sense for me to start my own team. So I got into the business in 2007, 2008, like right on the cusp. And it was a great idea. And then I started my own team in February of 2021, which was actually a pretty good time in the market to start a team. Still took a minute to get all the systems in place. And we are going to be 2 years in February. We just had our annual team dinner last night. And now I have 5 agents. I just hired my first sales manager. I have a director of operations, and I have an executive assistant that helps me kind of keep everything going. So that's kind of where the business is, where the business is for KJ right now. And we're growing and expanding. And most importantly, I feel like we're hitting our stride with like the team structure. We started doing Tom Ferry coaching on day one of starting the team.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was really helpful because I didn't know, I'd been on all these teams and I thought they all really sucked at like how they structure their team. And I was like, there has to be a better way to do this.
Well, and so I think that that's important. I talk to a lot of like new agents that want to sign up for coaching. And I'm like, hey, when you sign up for coaching, like they're not going to tell you like, do this every single day. And this is what your life should look like. You need to like have some success and failure in real estate for them to be able to say, hey, this is for you to be able to say, this is what I do well. These are my deficiencies, or this is the direction I'm now going to go in. And like, I could use some help there to kind of shorten that learning curve and avoid mistakes and stuff like that. And so that's where I think people sometimes don't necessarily have that yet. And obviously being in the business, you know, for over 10 years and then starting a team, like you knew what didn't work and what worked for teams, you know what you wanted, but like having someone to help you get that done faster, get that done probably more organized than you would have done on your own and things like that is always beneficial. So, you know, I think that's a good move getting into coaching. Do you think if you were a brand new agent today, you would join a team? Like, especially because I feel like New York's like a difficult market.
I mean, I was on teams for so long that like, I think that it's such a great way to get to know the business. I think it's a very lonely business. Otherwise, I think that there's virtually no coaching and mentorship within the industry if you're not on a team. And honestly, like if you're only coaching and mentorship's coming from your manager or like a one-off relationship you have with another agent that's going to do a deal with you, that's just not enough. It's just not enough volume. Like you need more deals under your belt to actually know, like you're saying, you need like some failures to know what you're good at and how to keep things going.
Yeah. I always feel like looking back on it now, especially as we're like trying to figure out what our agent avatar is. And I mean, well, not trying, we didn't know what our agent avatar is, but as we discuss our agent avatar and we discuss who we want to hire and we discuss these different things, it's definitely something that I think about. And my husband always challenges me on things. And he's like, well, would you do that if you were on a team? And I was like, well, I never would have joined a team. Right. And so that's kind of like the back and forth that we have. But that's just kind of my personality. And he's like, well, I think if you would have found a team similar to what we have, you would have joined one. I'm like, well, maybe I would have, you know, but I don't know. That was
I mean, when I was looking for a job as a real estate agent in 2007, 2008, like the only team that was available was like somebody who was just like, yeah, I have a team. And like, you can be on my team. And like, here's a split structure when you like, you know, you're expected to show and you're expected to do board packages and you're expected to do some admin stuff and help get these listings live and show up for photography. And then you're expected to like, kind of like work on your own stuff and try to convert people from these open houses and these listings I'm letting you work on and show. And that was basically the way that teams were structured. Yeah. That was the structure. Whereas now I think we like laugh at that. But the truth is there's something to be said for joining a team in certain, if you have a certain personality type where you are kind of, you have your hands in everything for a little while to learn maybe what all the pieces of the business are. So you can say, hey, I am either ops or I am sales and I understand why ops exists and I'm ready to pay for that. Yeah. With taking a smaller cut by being on a team. And
well, and that's something that I find to be interesting because like when we hire our admin roles, right? So like a transaction coordinator or marketing manager or marketing assistant or something like that, like if they're licensed, some of them need to be licensed like for the state, but if they're licensed, like I want to make sure that they don't want to sell real estate, right? Because like we had a lot of turnover because like I'd hire you, you know, and you'd be like, oh yeah, like I want to be an agent. So I'm like, cool, come in and learn the business and do all the things you just said, right? Like do open houses, try to convert your own business, but like you're going to do my assistant work in the meantime. And then like, it's just a churn, right? Because it's like, well, now I'm ready. So I'm going to go out on my own, or now I'm ready. So I'm an agent on your team. And like, we like to have our licensed admin people like want to just do that, right? Like they have the license, but they realize they like the ops better than the client facing stuff. Because it just, I feel like the churn is just too significant.
But it's also like, I think this idea of turning this into an assembly line is kind of what you have to do if you really want to scale. I mean, and the highest and best use piece, the truly amazing salespeople on my team who have the most potential are terrible at admin. Like I think that there needs to be but all right, so let's rephrase that. The people on my team who are the best at lead generation and rapport are usually the worst at admin. However, I do think then there's another layer where like the true leaders in real estate that are like the top that then create these mega teams. Those are the ones that can like suck it up and like do that admin when they need to do it because they know how important it is to that whatever next piece it is. And they can like read a good email and like do that whole thing and write it. But they're like, but I can't do this all day, every day because this just isn't what I should be doing.
I always thought that I was good at paperwork, and I'm a pretty organized person. Like, and especially like in our little friend group, I'm definitely like, the calendar invite sender and the spreadsheet maker and all that. But like when I hired my first really good TC, I was like, okay, here you go. You do the paperwork. Yeah. Clearly I wasn't as good at this as I thought I was, and you're way better. And, it just makes more sense for you to do this.
Right, but you know the time and the place when like you need to do that little bit of admin for yourself. Otherwise, it's really going to be an SHIT show.
You can say shit,
literally, like or like where I'm like, no, I got to write a kick-ass email for this client. Like it's got to be a badass email, and they've got to be like, holy moly, she did so much research. This is mind blowing. I have to go with this woman.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about you getting into real estate. So you got in back in 2007, 2008. Mm-hmm. And so what did you do before? And like, what
was there? Could you actually, there was actually not much I could do because I came out of college and I lived in Chicago. And when I was living in Chicago, I literally I waited tables. I did destination management, which is actually like a thing where which is what you would like literally coordinate like buses and shuttles for like events and stuff, event planning and that kind of thing. I worked for a photographer at one point. Then I worked in like a cafe.
All right. So real estate seems like it was the perfect progression.
Yeah, it was perfect. Perfect. I think I was just like really good at getting where I wanted to be and being a jack of all trades. And then when I moved to Italy, I was in Italy and I was teaching business English.
Yeah. Okay.
And then after I was teaching business English, I basically was like, I basically ended up getting this job where I was the sales manager, which is ironic because I'd never done sales. I was the international sales person for this company that did designs for greeting cards and wrapping paper. And they sold the licenses to their designs to these greeting card and wrapping paper companies around the country, around Europe, basically, because I was living in Europe. And that part of the business was just being super compressed into way smaller price points. And so it was like a dying industry a little bit. And I was basically doing their sales. So I was making the phone calls and I was helping them get appointments and then helping them sell these designs.
Yeah.
And I did that for a year. And I think from doing that, I realized how much it was crazy to be, first of all, a woman in Europe trying to make money. Really tough. And because there's the whole gender dynamic there that's wild. And then there's also a financial piece, which is that the salaries are super, super low. And I'm used to spending like an American, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Even if you don't make much money, we spend a lot of money, right?
Yeah. Why not?
So that's who we are. It's America, people. So basically I came back to the US with my tail between my legs because I would already burned through, I don't even know what to get to be doing that experience. And I came home and I lived with my parents while I got my real estate license because my stepfather was like, you like sales, you need to sell something that every single thing you sell, you make really good money.
And that everyone needs, right?
Yeah. And what's the point in selling something that's a small dollar value? Just sell something that's big. So every time you do a sale, you make a lot of money. So I got into real estate that way. And once I got my real estate license, my parents helped me have a couple of meetings with friends that were in real estate. And I happened to meet this real estate agent that was in New York City who was looking for a team member on her team. And she was perfectly nice. But they didn't have any structure. And then the bottom dropped out of the market. And so I started looking for a position working for somebody where I was going to get some stability.
Yeah.
Because there was no stability in the position I had before. So, and that's how I found the woman I worked for the first 8 years in the business. And at the time she was doing $1 million in GCI, which was a really big deal.
Yeah.
In New York City. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And
now that's just now it's
you hit $1 million in GCI and that's like you had a good year. For an agent that just started on your own. And so
welcome to New York.
Right. And so so it was a really good experience though, because she and I had a lot of, we worked really well together. And, and what was great also was that the person who I was dating, who's now my husband, was getting into real estate development and he had worked for a developer for a long time. And that enabled me to start getting some visibility on some of the stuff he was working on, which also taught me a lot in a very short time period around underwriting buildings, pricing, all the other pieces that it took to be a real estate agent. Like there was a lot that I got visibility around. So anyway, so that's kind of that's how it happened. And then from there, it kind of like the rest is history. And I have done a lot of business since then. And now my team is doing really, really well.
So, looking now at the team, if you could do it over again, I think obviously hiring a coach at the beginning was probably very helpful in making sure that you didn't make as many mistakes, right?
Yeah.
As many, right? But doing it all over again, what would you say would be like your advice to someone if they're like, I'm going to start a team on January 1st. I'm super excited. What would be your advice? Like, don't do this or do this type thing.
Well, I think that the personality profiling around the hires is really important. I think like owning that piece, I think that's a piece that we've used and really been successful using personality profiling. I think it's taken me a little while to get my head around it and learn it. But it is really, 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 really helpful. The other piece is, I think we were talking about this just now or earlier, is this idea of being ready to separate church and state and just be like, ops is ops, sales is sales. And like the two are different people. They're different skill sets. They have different motivations in life. And that's just what it is. Right. And I think that's something that's really really important. And then the other piece of it, I mean, I'm hoping I'm going to tell you in 6 months, it's going to be like hire a sales manager, but I just did that. So I don't actually know.
We'll have to do a follow-up, here in a little while.
The KJ predictions. How's it going? 6 months into 2023.
Yeah, I think that the personality types is huge. And then also motivators is huge too. And that's like, I know what I'm motivated by isn't what you are, isn't what someone else is. And that's something that understanding that for the people that are on your team and like what, money isn't always the motivator, right? Sometimes it's recognition. Sometimes it's, like the love languages or whatever, sometimes it's other things. And so when you can understand that and be able to like tailor or understand that it's like just not a one size fits all, it definitely helps in hiring. Do you guys use a specific like personality test?
We've been using DISC because our coach uses DISC and it's like such a simple, easy, universal kind of thing. And I literally used it on my nanny today. I was like, can you fill this out? Just want to
see. Well, and I think with DISC too, it's important to see where people stand as compared to you or as compared to the sales manager, as compared to the people that they're going to be interacting with. Because you need specific levels of drivers and organization and different things. And so that's always an interesting comparison as well.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So you were the first female broker on $1 Million Listing. How did it feel to break into the boys club of that TV show?
I think the funny thing about it is like, it was really different than it was probably for the first people on the show. It's such a different, first of all, it's so different being a woman because of hair, makeup, wardrobe, the whole thing. It's like a real deal. And so that was a big piece that I wasn't expecting how just intense that was going to be. Yeah. And then the other piece of it was the fact that I didn't and I think it was like I got on the show when it was so established that I hadn't. I mean, if you look at the when the show started filming, which was January for me, I started filming in probably beginning of February of 2020. I didn't have my own team. I didn't have an assistant when I started filming. I was alone. I was like on a team as a team member, started filming. And then I got an assistant kind of at the end of February. And like, I just was drowning. Like it was, I mean, when I think about it, I feel like I lost out on like a couple of years in my kids' lives because I was just like so in it. Like there was a 5-week vacation in 2020 that I didn't go on because I was filming in New York City, like with my family.
Yeah.
And it was just like super intense, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of like learning about yourself and how you look on camera, because, you know, there's a certain layer that you can see of understanding and how you translate on camera, and how much energy you have to bring to the camera, because the truth is, it's all real. You have to bring so much to the camera for it to like you, you know, what it is. And especially when you know, they're getting bites, you know,
a conversation like this isn't, you know, TV worthy, right? Like it's like,
I mean, like,
real
listen,
conversation of like,
I feel like I have more energy. I bring more energy to Zoom than I ever would have
Zoom
previously, before, for sure. And so that's something that was intense. And I would say I learned a ton from everybody on the show of how they do things and why they do things a certain way. And I would say that what it was like being in boot camp, like being in like reality TV boot camp while you're still trying to grow a business that is just starting to kind of really finally take off, because my personal confidence had shifted so much too. So I think that was like a big piece, because clearly you're not on a team for 12 years if you like really feel like you can do it yourself. And that shift happened while I was filming, and that shift made me be like, it's time for me to not only just have an assistant, but maybe figure out what that assistant's really going to do. And maybe that means having a showing agent for myself. And then the team I was on was like, you're trying to make a team under a team. Like, you got to back up, you know? And then it was like, oh, okay, I got to figure this out. And so that was really, so, you know, there was a lot about filming and the fact that you're like, you know, on TV and interacting with those cast members.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot about like, okay, I've committed to this thing, which is basically committing to taking my business to like an exponential level. And what does committing to that look like? It isn't just working more hours, because there's no longer hours left.
Yeah. There aren't, none of they don't exist. So.
No. And they kind of didn't exist before. And I was just lying to myself for 10 years, but it was more that now, like everybody on the producers were like, girl, you got to figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so, you know, obviously where you are today is a lot different than where you were before you started the show, right? As far as having the team and where you are in your career. I feel like just from, you know, I guess like I knew you from the Tom Ferry world more so for $1 Million Listing, if I'm being honest, but I feel like, you know, even your content has changed and what you're putting out in the world has changed and things like that. I know I saw a post the other day of like you were shooting a ton of content and things like that, and like just doing lots of different things. What are some things you feel like were things that you weren't necessarily expecting as like the only word I can think of is consequences, but that's not the word that I want to use, but as things that have stemmed from the show that you're like, oh, I didn't think that this was a thing I would be doing in my career, and now this is something I do on a regular basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think when you grow a team like I'm doing, I think you don't realize, and Ryan actually said this the other day. He was talking about how like at some point, if the camera followed me now, it wouldn't be as exciting as following me before. And I think that's something that all of us team leaders start to realize. It's like, I go to the office a lot and like, I sit in front of a computer and then I make phone calls, and I don't see property all the time. And I'm not out with buyers all the time. And I'm not out with sellers all the time. And, you know, it kind of ebbs and flows because of the fact that the rest of it's me behind the scenes, which for better or for worse is something that like, I didn't ever really envision that or know that I wanted that. But at the same time, from a stamina perspective, it wasn't sustainable to be out and like showing all day, like being out showing like listings all day, then taking out buyers, then trying to get stuff done in the evenings. Like that wasn't sustainable. And then also going after new business and making new business calls and then doing this stuff. Like, I think I never realized, first of all, I never realized how many podcasts, interview, like television interviews, all that, how much time that takes, how much time it takes away and energy It takes away from other prospecting stuff. It's super important though, and how much it actually adds to the brand. I never knew how much the whole PR piece was going to be. I never knew that like that was like that. Then that becomes like a fixed cost. Like it's no longer something that you're like, oh, I'm gonna have PR for a couple months. It's like, no, we started this thing and now we're in it. And this is like a whole piece of everything. And then I think the other part of it is like, I always thought that I was going to have a hand in every deal forever. And that the only way stuff was going to happen was if I was fully in it. And I think that what I've learned from all of this is actually you can scale and you can get to a point where people are taking the heavy lifting and you're dealing with the more difficult conversations and the, prospecting at a higher level and the top down lead gen that I think I didn't realize. I guess I just didn't, I never was looking to the future thinking, oh, wow, I want to have this huge team. And then what is a huge team leader doing all the time? And then what is somebody who then is a public figure in real estate doing all day? Like, what does that look like? And I think where I want to go next is, okay, what do I actually want to be doing all day, every day? Because now it's like the push pull of, okay, should I pick one day for press every month? But then you get TV interview requests. So like, you can't say no to those. So you move stuff around for those because they're big. But then those move other stuff around and people see you doing too much of that. And they're like, is she really doing her job?
What's really funny about what you're saying, is on a whole different scale, obviously with, what you've seen for $1 Million Listing and everything, but like it's every agent and every team leader's struggle every day. You know what I mean? It's just like yours is on a different scale. And that's like, I talk to team leaders all the time that are like, well, I don't know, like how often should I be going on appointments? How often should I this? Well, I don't have time for these buyers because, and I'm doing this and I'm going to this conference and I'm blah, 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 whatever. But I mean, in hiring the team and having those people behind you, and having a sales manager and your agents and these things, it's like, you slowly start to realize that there is more time in the day, right? As, you grow this awesome organization. And that's my favorite part of the team is like them doing things that like they didn't really realize they could do, and us growing because of that, right? The pie getting bigger because of that. So
it's a wild ride, I think, for the it's a wild ride. And I think that's why the numbers are so important. I think that for me, someone like me, if I didn't have the numbers to look at, I would literally constantly just be like in some sort of like a manic or like depressed state, because it would only, how I was feeling the business would be only based on my emotional state, which wouldn't help anybody.
Yeah.
Because literally, like I haven't had any phone calls today. I've had like 3 podcasts and I did a content shoot, but I haven't had any phone calls with anything. Like, are we going to make any money ever again? I think my business is dead. But it's like, no, you got to like take a step back. But and I think that's honestly like I didn't track my numbers for the first like 12, 13 years of being in the business. I never even looked at my numbers. That's how much money I'm making. I'm making okay.
I've got money in my account. I know that. Who's your coach?
I coach with Yvonne Arnold.
Okay. So I was pretty sure that's who you coached with. And I'm sure she cringes every time you make that comment about like not knowing your numbers, because she's so numbers in detail.
I mean, she still cringes. I just had my call with her. She still cringes.
I like to think I have pretty good systems, and then I get on a call with her and I'm like crying by the end of it. So, I feel your pain. I feel your pain, KJ. No, I just wrote that down, like what you just said about knowing your numbers, because that is huge. Too many people go on that emotion of like, oh, well, I haven't had any consults today, or I haven't gone on a listing appointment. I haven't signed any new listings, so my business may be doing terribly. And like, it could be doing well, it could be doing terrible, but there's lots of other KPIs that you should be monitoring on a regular basis. So if you're not watching your numbers and you don't know your numbers, start tracking.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's like you got to track, and then it's figuring out, listen, I'm still not in a good place about tracking how many calls it takes for me to convert and things like that. Just because like, I don't know. I just feel like all I got to do is start going out and seeing people and making calls and like it rains. So I don't know. It's just like, I don't think like that, but I think that's another piece that I'm like ready for in my business.
It's also different for you than it is for like a brand new agent on your team, right? Like they need to track them because that's important for them to see that 50 calls equals 1 appointment equals, this many whatevers. Yeah. Where also, for you, if you lean into your past clients and sphere and 15 years of real estate clients and developers and people, you're going to drum up some business, right? So it's
Yeah,
like, how many times can you do that?
and then sometimes like I won't make any call, like I haven't been able to, deal with calls for a couple of days. And then, an agent on my team, I have somebody who's an agent on my team who is incredibly connected. And like, she pulled me in on a meeting last week and it was like, oh, this could be like 2 to 3 billion in sales over the next 5 years.
Casual.
but it's, so then it's like, so then you say, okay, what, like, if I translate what this meeting was into how many calls it would have taken for me to just sell this much, I can't even make that many calls. So how do we take a step back and think strategically and be chipping away at this big, crazy opportunity every day, multiple times a day, until it's ours? And who do we need to talk to? And who do I need to, and what kind of politics do I need to be working in? How much, and it's like, because what happens is actually those bigger opportunities, when you've gotten in the right room, are actually the ones that have real potential, right? But then it's actually almost getting more here about like, okay, like how do I start thinking the 100 different ways that we can chip away at this from so many different angles, manifest it? Cause it's like a different level, but then, I have a huge listing and it's just about like holding on to it for dear life and getting people back in there and creating demand and waiting for the demand to come back, or the small listings that like are real sellers.
Yeah.
That would sell.
It's tough. And that's what, whenever I haven't ever had any multi-billion-dollar opportunities. Our average price went's a little lower than it is over there, just a little bit. But, whenever we have those big opportunities, whether it's a development or property seller or something like that, I'm like, okay, I want to stay focused on this, but all of those other things you just said, you can't forget about, because those are the things that are going to make you money now. And this large opportunity, like, isn't, even if they sign today, it's not happening tomorrow, so those are the things that I'm like, all right, we've got to work both of these and all of these, and you can't drop the ball. And that's where having a great team and having people that, are helping you out with different aspects of things is always helpful. All right, switching gears a little bit. You lived in Italy. I know you travel a lot. Where is your favorite place to go travel to, or the favorite place that you've been to?
Well, I'm a huge fan of Italy in general. I love Rome because I lived in Rome. And so like, I love familiarity and stuff like that. So like, that's a big thing for me. So yeah, I love Rome. I also love Milan. I lived in Milan for a couple of years, so I love Milan. And I love those like familiar Italian places that I know. I also love it because I speak Italian and my kids speak Italian. My husband speaks Italian. So like, for us, it's like that. Yeah, it's easy, but there's like so much depth to the culture and the humor and the food and everything. And it's beautiful that, I don't know, I love those places. I'm a big fan.
No, that's awesome. I always learn how to say like hello and thank you and
you gotta learn that.
And whatever. But like, I always wish when I go to a foreign country, I'm like, God, if I could just speak the language, this would be so much cooler of a trip, right? You could just like, but too many languages in too many countries. So
I mean, the thing is like, and I think this is the same, this applies to so many things, but if you can pick another culture or another place that you can get really, really like a deeper relationship or understanding of, even if you don't need to speak the language fluently, but you can really know it well and have your places and have your stuff that I do think that there's a lot of potential for enjoyment. And I don't think there's anything wrong with revisiting places that you've already been to instead of going to new places you've never been. Because I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe this is like the mom of three in me. I'm like, do we really have to try a new place? Couldn't we just like go and we know that it's going to be good and we know that they're going to have pizza and pasta and we know that like, I don't know, we like know enough about the fact that it's going to be okay and the time difference and the whole thing, because there's a lot when you have little kids, there's just a lot of like moving parts.
How old are your kids right now?
They're 5, 7, and 9.
Yeah. I mean, still like going to places where you don't know where things are, you don't speak the language, you know, all of those things definitely seems like it would be a handful. So yeah, going somewhere that, I mean, and if you live there and you know all the places and you speak the language, I mean, that would kind of just be like you being like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to California. I mean, they're both, like just a little bit longer of a flight heading in a different direction, but
Yeah.
I'm a fan. I like it. All right. Along the same lines, I've got one last question for you, and it is: if it were your last meal on Earth, what would you eat?
Well, I don't eat gluten, but if it was my last meal on Earth, I would, and I would have it at. I would go to Rome because there's a great restaurant in Rome called Le Mani and Pasta, which I used to go to when I was living there, and they make a really good they made all these great homemade pastas and really good seafood, and that's where I would go. And I'd probably get a super basic a cacio e pepe or some really really boring pasta dish that was super plain that had the bucatini, which is the spaghetti that is empty.
But when you're in Italy, the really plain, pasta, I feel like that's what you got to go with because it's just going to be the best pasta you've had, right?
Yeah, and also there's a lot to be said for the simplicity of some of the dishes, the simplicity because the ingredients are amazing and all that.
Yeah, cool. Well, KJ, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking the time today to chat. I took a bunch of notes as far as teams and hiring and numbers and scaling. So I appreciate all of the insight and wish you nothing but the best in the coming year.
Thank you. It was great. This was so much fun. I'm so glad we did this. And we met. I'm glad we met because I feel like we met for the first time finally at the last summit. So
yeah, always a good time.
Here we go.